Hello, everyone. Welcome to Briefing TEI's webcast on how to build and maintain a successful digital relationship with your clients. A big thank you to today's sponsor, NetDocuments, for making this happen with us today. I'm joined by two representatives from NetDocuments, Dan Hauck, the Chief Product Officer, and Alvin Tedjamulia, the CTO, as well as Caroline White Robinson, Head of Knowledge Management and Learning and Development at Shoosmiths, and Tom Rayson, the Senior Legal Director at London Stock Exchange Group, to give us the law firm and client perspectives respectively. A bit of housekeeping before we start. This is being recorded. Should you wish to look back or share around to your colleagues, do feel free to ask questions as we go along in the chat or the Q&A section, and I will ask during our panel discussions. We'll have two panel discussions today, first with the law firm side, and then second with the client's perspective. Before we get into the panel discussions, we're going to have a bit of a scene setter from Alvin from NetDocuments, who will give us his thoughts on what the challenges we are seeing in the market at the moment. So if I'll say goodbye to the rest of our panel for the moment, and we'll keep Alvin on. And Alvin, I'll pass to you.
All right, thank you so much. Yeah, so we have here, so can you go to the next slide, please? Next screen, yeah. So the challenge that we have here is to optimize a client-lawyer digital relationship. Next. And this has been accelerated through COVID. Next. The concept that we have is to focus on an integrated technology that will facilitate such client-lawyer digital relationship. Since documents are always the focus of collaboration, what we want is a single source of truth based on a document management system and a collaboration infrastructure that is matter-centric. As such, it has to access the documents and also the collaboration infrastructure, for sharing documents, even for planning and task management across, the client and the lawyer. Next. We want to also integrate a technology infrastructure that will facilitate, e-signature for finalizing the documents, for court filing, for creation of document sets, so that the client can receive a single document across multiple ones that exist in the service. And next one. We want to also ensure that this relationship is protected via an infrastructure of security that can withstand some of the hacks that we have heard lately. And next one, please. And then obviously have the content learning. So the client-lawyer collaboration challenges, in spite of all of the desires that we want to perfect technology, has to be mitigated for security breaches. So for example, the SolarWinds and the Microsoft Exchange risk that has just happened recently. We also have another challenge, is that both the clients and the lawyers are learning to adjust to all of this new norm and the new tools that we have received for collaboration. Next. Another challenge that we face is that disjointed collaboration applications. We have so many now with chats and messaging and email and video conferencing and task management, document set builders and e-signatures, all of them focusing on the specific aspect of collaboration and maybe not having ideal integration with the single source of truth, which is the content and the set of documents. Next. We also have, the absence of a consistent user experience as clients, are forced to work from home and work in the office, and lawyers are facing the same challenges. And next. So this collaboration infrastructure, of course, relies on web conferencing technologies, and the web conferencing technologies have their own set of document tools, which allows documents to exist in different parts of the service, maybe orphaning some of these documents. So next slide, please. It's interesting to notice that during COVID, the productivity that we can measure as to what users are doing at home has increased. So one of the questions is, can we really measure the productivity increase during the pandemic? Next. What we at NetDocuments have done is to capture the total number of transactions that every user does during a week. So transactions, means, reading a document, doing a search, and sharing with clients. All of that can be measured in terms of the total number that a user actually performs such transactions per week. And what we have noticed next is that if we compare, during the pre-COVID and post-COVID, we have seen next actually a 20% productivity increase, during COVID. So next, so it's clear that the average user productivity using a solid cloud infrastructure can actually increase during the time of the pandemic. So we need to optimize, such a productivity increase to also have optimal method of collaborating with clients. Next. But these are some of the challenges. The first and very real challenges are the security breaches that we have known during COVID. One is the SolarWinds breach, where a foreign nation was able to hack, next, a trusted security solution, which is SolarWinds, which manages your infrastructures and your servers, next. And through the hack into SolarWinds, was able to breach, next, the contents of your email infrastructure, your document systems, your network. And what we have seen is an actual breach that was made into several organizations, such as the Homeland Security Department, the Department of Commerce, Department of Justice, Department of Treasury, Department of Energy, including several very well-known organizations that are very conscientious about security, such as Microsoft, such as FireEye, which is a group that protects the cybersecurity infrastructure of companies, Cisco, Intel, and 18,000 others. And right at the verge of that, next, the Microsoft Exchange breach. Yet another foreign state was able to hack the Exchange infrastructure, and next, and through that, they have been able to breach 30,000 other entities. Next, this imposes a huge security risk as to how we collaborate with clients, because the mantra now by the organizations, that are doing such attacks, is to not target any specific group, but their mantra is hack anyone you can. We don't know who we're going to hack, but we're just going to hack it there, and then we're going to actually compromise the security infrastructure of the very software that exists to protect your services. Next. So while in the past, the security focus has been on specific security threats, and then that we want to protect the perimeter, of our cyber infrastructure, and then of course, protect against end user carelessness. Today, next, what we are facing is protecting against our own internal people and internal software. Concept where we do not trust anybody. So the concept of nation state attacking not just a local security breach from a local hacker, and then also facing subpoenas, and then also, of course, facing end user carelessness. These are very, very strong risk in sharing clients, and also, keeping just the documents in your infrastructure. Next, one of the big challenges that we also have is to make sure that our infrastructure has been certified by accredited institutions, such as the ISO, such as the AICPA, not just in terms of security, but in terms of availability and privacy, and in concepts, and then authentication and certification organizations, such as the GDPR. One of the most important one that I want to highlight is that FIPS 140-2 level 3 is the bottom one, the right or the second one, which actually ensures that the security of your data is such that even internal software cannot access it. So these are some of the challenges in terms of security for document sharing. Next. Of course, one of the big challenges for sharing documents also deals with the end user experience consistency. Next. The concept is, do we have the infrastructure, to have a consistent experience, whether it is working from home, next, whether it is working in the office, that's both from the lawyer and also from the client perspective, and next, or having some kind of a cloud infrastructure. Next. The only way today that we know of to have a consistent user experience across the three environments is actually placing the documents in the cloud. And what that has forced us all to do in law firms is to make sure that we rush into the cloud, that we have the infrastructure of communicating with the clients, for this optimal digital collaboration. Next. Another challenge that we have is the collaboration tools today, which are abundant, are non-matter centric. So we have all kinds of things, that we can use to collaborate with clients, either collaborating through tasks or collaborating with a closing room or collaborating with some kind of a sharing devices. All of these, however, do not consider the fact that they are creating a different environment for each collaboration tool, different workspaces, different security, different ethical walls infrastructure, different authentication mechanism, and maybe two of the big problems, different storage mechanism, different search technologies, different user experiences. These are big challenges that the tools, although they may be perfected to their own collaboration target, they are not considering the whole of matter-centric collaboration. Next. Another challenge that we have is web conferencing right now is highly required for client collaboration. And there are several infrastructures out there that is available. We're using one right now. Next. All of these collaboration infrastructures have their own document tools. And then next, 4 times there. These documents, can be stored in their own tools into all of these different infrastructures. Next. What we have is that these are encouraging the scattering of the documents and discouraging the single point of truth. Next. Because these documents that are created for sharing across all of the different infrastructure are being orphaned, not being managed by the central document infrastructure. So the challenge is that web conferencing platforms are also proliferating orphan documents. Next. So this is the final challenge that I'm going to propose here, although there are many, but this is a key one here, is the concept that there are so many new technologies that the lawyers and the clients themselves, are inundated with all of these different tools for client and lawyer collaboration. So yes, the payback can be huge. We can effectively share with our clients. We can effectively, transact through the web. But the challenges of security, of learning, of multiple user experiences are real. So thank you, and I'm turning the time back to you, Kaylee.
Thank you so much, Alvin. That's some really good points there around security that people often don't think about when they think about collaboration. They think about, on the ground, how are we going to work with clients? So some really interesting points that we'll dig a little bit more into. We will bring on Dan and Caroline now, and we'll get into a little bit more of what that looks like in law firms and hear from those perspectives. Hi, Caroline. Thanks for joining us today. I'm going to pose the first question to you. just a scene set from your perspective as well, how has the pandemic changed the way your firm approaches client collaboration?
I think we've got off to a really good start in a virtual world, if I'm honest. It's not the same as when we were back in the office by any stretch of the imagination, but I think we got off to a good start. I would say for my law firm, it was already on that journey to being more of a remote law firm, insofar as we had the technological infrastructure put in place to allow us to work from home. So from a collaboration point, many of the tools that Alvin has just alluded to, we had on board already, which would allow us to do these meetings and share work, etc. But I think we've still got a road to go, certainly with our clients. Not always being on the same infrastructure is sometimes a challenge. Mm-hmm. Not everybody can access the same technology, and sharing documentation particularly can be quite tricky, particularly when you're working in remote areas and the bandwidth isn't particularly good on internet, etc. So I do think that we still have a way to go in going there, but thankfully we were better placed, but yes, still a journey ahead of us, I would say. And as clients become more sophisticated, that's a journey I think we need to go on with them.
Absolutely. Dan, it'd be interesting to hear from your perspective how that hybrid working model and trying to meld those two digital and physical worlds together also within collaboration. What's that looking like? How are those conversations going from your side?
Yeah, absolutely. Certainly we're starting to either come up with plans or actively start going back to the workspace. I do feel like, that making sure that folks are engaged and able to kind of work on the same page out of the same set of technologies is critical. It's been interesting to see, how some of the flows that have been adopted during COVID are going to probably persist. As people, continue and start to go back to the workspace. One of my favorite examples, and we started talking with customers very early on in COVID, and it came up several times, was this idea about, how are you going to do the pre-bill markup, right? And that, I was a practicing attorney, was kind of familiar with the process. As soon as someone mentioned it, or as soon as COVID hit, I realized, oh my gosh, yeah, this is a problem, right? Because what used to happen was you'd print out the bills, and then the partner or whoever would mark it up and then hand it back to an assistant or legal team member, and then that would get inputted. And that was a very manual process that breaks down quite quickly when nobody's in the same room together. And so it's been interesting because we've seen a variety of different ways to respond to that. We actually introduced a capability that lets you mark up PDF documents digitally, and those type of kind of new approaches to the markup, I think, are going to continue. I don't think that there's going to be a lot of people who are going to be eager to go back to printing out 100 pages and marking it up by hand. So it's been quite interesting, and I think one of the interesting areas is going to be like the meeting technologies as well, and thinking about how is the folks who are in the conference room going to continue to engage successfully. So it's not just there's the person on the screen in the back of the room, but rather, those people are actively engaged in the conversation. That applies to the clients as well. I think, the exact same, because oftentimes the clients are not on site. And so what we'll see is this ability to have kind of some of these newer technologies that allow you to kind of have that remote engagement. I saw a really interesting new technology that came out in the web conference space, and they've basically created, their kind of key value is that they've created this cross-canceling noise cancellation bit. And so like what that means, because we all know if you've got 4 people in the room and they all flip on the Zoom meeting or so forth, you get the echoes and all sorts of artifacts that really disrupt the meeting. So they figure that out. I think you're going to see a lot more of that type of thing as suddenly like there's multiple people remote and in the room together. It's going to be interesting to see.
Yeah, absolutely. Caroline, I want to go back to you just around more of that hybrid working approach. Is also what flexibility means for in the day-to-day, from working flexible hours to what's that going to look like for teams, and how do you collaborate within your own teams internally, but then how does that translate to when you have to work with the client?
Well, I think we're underway as part of a revolution, to be honest with you, in terms of the way we work. I think there were always people in business who said, "Oh, presenteeism, you've got to be in the office. I've got to see you here." It's and we know horror stories of where people leave jackets on the back of their chairs and leave their computers running just so that they look like they're still in the office. And I think what the pandemic has done has really blown that myth away. We don't need to be present in an office anymore to generate output. And as Alvin's slide showed, productivity has gone up. So I'm not sure there is an argument anymore for people to say, I need you in the office. However, there is an argument to say that I need to be connected to you. And I think that's the fundamental part of all of this. We might not be in offices, but as long as we can connect with individuals, then that is going to be for me, the paramount thing. You brought in, to the discussion, the ideas of boundaries and whatever, and I think that will be something we will have to grapple with. Technology is marvelous, but with everything, there is a shadow weakness to it, and technology means that we can be online 24/7. And with my learning and development hat on, I know that 24/7 for humans is not good. We need downtime. So I think from that perspective, there is still a balance to be created between how tech can support us with this connectivity, which we absolutely need, but also how do we create new boundaries around the ways in which we work? How do we protect time? People, I know that on the technology I use, there's a little dot that says I'm available. Well, I might be here, but I actually might want to just put my head down, and we need to create some rules around when you're on Do Not Disturb. Don't misinterpret that as somebody who doesn't want to engage. That just means they just need some quiet thinking time. And I think we used to be, we had the rules for that when we were in the office. You could take yourself off to a quiet room and sit there, and people knew that that's what you were doing. I think we need to reestablish the rules around what technology will bring us, and then the collaboration will flow from that, because I don't think anybody's anti-collaboration. It's just about knowing how and when to collaborate with people at the right times.
Yeah. Alvin, just to go back to you and some of what people now expect technology to be able to do, and you mentioned how fundamental it is for you to use the cloud. What are the demands now coming through from your clients and law firms around what technology should allow us to do? And then I want you to talk a little bit more about that security point and how the new flexible working arrangements will mean that people will have to have secure technology and understanding of that technology.
Yes, Kaylee, what we have seen in this last year, that has been a huge increase in demand in terms of having a integrated solution that is cloud-based. So, of course, cloud is really the only way that you can have a consistent user experience across anywhere, and then also the consistent user experience with your clients. What we have seen is that our law firms and our corporate legal departments are asking us to say, hey, just give us one infrastructure that contains all of the documents and all of the emails. That is our single source of truth in the cloud, but it has to be secured and it has to be highly efficient in terms of collaborating with clients. Security today is that you should be able to protect these documents against subpoenas, against these random nation-state attacks that is infiltrating our own infrastructures through trusted software that we have installed to protect our perimeters and our documents infrastructure. So the way to fundamentally solve the problem there is to encrypt uniquely every document and make it transparent to the end user and even to the system administrators. Make this encryption so strong, and that's called entropic encryption, to the point that nation states cannot break the encryption, because the concept of the key strength, they call it the randomization strength, is it's fundamentally unbreakable. And then to store these keys in vaults, not on the disk drive, not in the application software, stored in vaults that are tamper-proof, meaning that the software itself cannot access these keys, that the security administrators themselves cannot access these keys. So then you say, well, then how do you decrypt the document if the software and the administrators cannot access the keys? Well, there is a concept that says that if we can uniquely encrypt the document and then place what we want to be encrypted inside these vaults, so that these vaults, they are rated by the federal agencies, as unbreakable, can decrypt themselves inside it, so that no software can access the keys directly. That is the fundamental concept of how to secure against your own internal people and against these nation-state attacks that uses your software to break the contents of what you want to protect. So to make sure that the software cannot access this. These are some of the technologies that we have been doing for the past 5 or 6 years. Nation state and subpoena protection, built in, invisible to the user, but fundamentally, secure against some of these concepts, against some of these attacks, some of these hacks. And then, Kaylee, is to provide very strong services right in the cloud itself. Not just the concept of hosting and organizing documents, but reach out into all of the collaborations and externalization, document delivery, automatic capture of email, creating tools that you can share with clients and allow them to edit, these documents when it is necessary. Creating tools that can plan, with tasks, creating tools that can aggregate document sets, creating tools, that will sign documents, and all these type of things. It's just it's so important to focus on matter-centric collaboration that is backed by a very strong infrastructure and availability.
Yeah, Caroline, I don't know how you find your firm is having those conversations internally around what does your technology use look like? How do you bring on different external parties and keep your people internally as up to date with the security risk that is involved in that?
Well, I think we're very lucky to have had very public national campaigns such as the GDPR changes in law, etc., which helps with that. And working obviously in a law firm, they know the consequences of not doing the very basics. So in some respects, I've got a really easy life, in comparison to other industries. They know what they've got to do. That said, there is always a nervousness about where these documents are, how are they being stored, how can they be intercepted, and it is a difficult challenge. And I know I can speak obviously from a Shoosmiths perspective, but I'm sure lots of other law firms, from a KM perspective, when I've been talking to their heads of KM, the cloud has been a worry for them, the security of the cloud and moving to the cloud. But I think that the world has moved on slightly, and the pandemic, etc., has dictated to us that we will have to move to a cloud-based solution, if we haven't done so already, because that one point of source of knowledge, the one point of the truth is so important when you're trying to collaborate with clients, on a worldwide basis or national basis. So I think we will move there, but again, it's how safe the documentation is, and then obviously making sure that your people have got the skills to do that, to encrypt it properly, or to go through the right process. And hopefully that's something that we'll perhaps come on and Dan and I can chat about, is this idea of how good things like AI are and how good the people are. But if the process is broken in the middle and people don't know how to use the process, then that becomes a weak link for me. So yeah, I think there are a few things that we need to think about.
Yeah, Dan, did you want to touch on some of those things that Caroline was mentioning around AI, and what's the kind of product vision for these different technologies in the collaboration space?
Yeah, it's amazing. Like, I think where we're going now, because we've kind of gone from that baseline of understanding, like, look, you should be creating that single source of truth. You should be putting your documents and your emails and so forth. You should, and all the kind of associated metadata that helps you find it and so forth into this single source of truth. But now we're kind of moving to the kind of next generation of saying, okay, great, it's all here, it's all secure, but what's the kind of things that I can now understand better about my relationship with my client? What's the things that I can understand about, who's working on what and when and how quickly are things being done by just looking at the signals that are being generated out of those systems of record. And that's an area that we're spending a lot of time in. We actually just released a new product in the analytics space. And it's designed to help do that. If you come into a matter cold And the client is expecting you to come up to speed very, very quickly. They don't want to pay to train you on learning what their matter is all about. They may have already been paying a lawyer for a year, and that lawyer, for whatever reason, is no longer on the project, right? And so you need to get read into that matter quickly. And so you need to understand, what are the most important relationships? What are the most important documents? Who authored those documents? When did activity happen over the course of the last year in this matter? And I think those are the types of things that we're now, I call it kind of analytics for everybody, right? You don't have to wait for a manager or for some supervisor to kind of pull all the reports together and say, here's where we are with this, and here's where you need. This is now data that we can intelligently put in front of users, everybody, and so that we can all make kind of better decisions and provide better client service. So it's a really exciting new area, I think, for us as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
I think, Dan, as well, that's where we're seeing our clients wanting to be as well. So for a lot of our clients, GC teams, etc., they don't necessarily have the same kind of document system that a private practice law firm would have, and therefore they're not able to share documents in the same way. So I think what they're keen to have is a platform where they can track matters. They can see where that productivity piece that you've just spoken to. They have an overview of that, and for some of these teams, they're massive legal teams, and when I'm working with the GCs, they do say actually having just visibility of everything that's going on and where particular documents are stored, because that question that you need the answer to will inevitably come outside the 9 to 5:30 hours, and just having that ability, and I think from a human emotional intelligence perspective, I think that gives them a little sense of confidence that actually all the documents, it's all in one place, and if they need it, they can go to it. And I think coming back to the whole flexibility piece of working hours and this revolution that we might be in, I think we need that going forward.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
And clients do.
Yeah. I just wanted to, before we bring on Tom from the client side, Caroline, just one last question for you is, you mentioned a little bit about what you're seeing as the KM space. And I'm wondering if you might talk a little bit more about how your team is now working more closely with in-house counsel and kind of being asked to join those pitches or that collaboration in that space. What does that look like?
Yeah, well, I would definitely say now, 15 years I've been at Shoosmiths, we are definitely much more prevalent at pitches and the whole bidding process and getting to know what our KM capabilities are. I do still think that we're great at recording the explicit knowledge, but how we get the tacit knowledge out on both sides is really important, and we need to come up with better ways of doing that. I think we've still got this part of this revolution where we need to take our behaviors and make them much more deliberate, particularly when it comes to supervision and having learning points. So one of the big things that I'm concerned about from a knowledge management perspective is when juniors were in the office, they would often overhear a conversation or a telephone call, etc., which would help them build their tacit knowledge about what was going on in the business. Or with clients, we don't have that capability if we don't think about it, but we can think about it. I'm working with clients and asking the question, if I was coming on as the partner in a law firm and said, I've got a junior here, they're just going to come on the Zoom call, but they're just going to remain quiet and without their video on, would you object to that? And most GCs that I've spoken to have said, not at all, of course, that's fine. I think there were the day that people didn't want to pay for that person to be in the room because that would be an expensive train ticket to London, or it would be a flight or something like that. But actually, there's no cost to a client. But the benefit to all of us is the ability to then generate that knowledge at that junior level. But I also think then we still need a solution to capture that tacit knowledge in a much easier way, because we don't always remember to hit record when we're on a Zoom call, or we don't think to include somebody on a telephone call that they would have overheard in the office. So that would still be the big thing for me from a KM perspective, is just how we get that tacit knowledge spread around the business, and particularly now we're in a remote, well, I believe we'll be in a remote hybrid working situation going forward.
Mm-hmm, absolutely, great. And Tom's just joined us, so we will move on to the next section. Thank you everyone for that initial kind of law firm perspective. Just a reminder to people viewing, please do ask questions in the chat or the Q&A, and I will pose it to the panel as we go. Tom, now that you're with us, lots to dig in there, lots of different topics covered in a short amount of time. So I want to know, from your perspective, how has collaboration with law firms worked historically, and how has that changed in the recent year?
Yeah, no, definitely. I mean, loads of interesting points that have been raised already, and I sort of all resonate. I think what's changed in the last year is just that there's no longer an option not to collaborate digitally. We are doing it daily. We are, to some extent, overburdened by the number of different platforms, and I think what Alvin is saying is around that disjointed approach is something that we see, and therefore what we're looking to do is, how can we simplify that? How can we become more joined up? How can we understand what works well for the internal team? And then how do we best engage with our law firms to make sure that they understand what our needs are? I think that we, if we look at the internal team and then the clients that we've got internally, we now are using platforms all the time to collaborate with them, whether that's Teams or whatever platform that they might be using. And that's driven a much better way of working that I think we missed the opportunity before when we were in the office. We think we're collaborating, but actually you're not always tracking everything. You're not always looking at the same golden source of information. You're not always going back to the same, even using the same document. And there's loads of inefficiencies. You're not taking feedback in a real-time basis. You're not using data in a smart way, because I think what Dan was saying is there's all this data that exists. How you extract the value in that, is really interesting, and there's all these kind of simple wins that you can have, and we've definitely seen that being forced to use more platforms has meant that the one challenge we had at the outset or historically has been adoption. Now everyone has adopted digital platforms, so that's a real opportunity in which to then springboard to, okay, well, if we're going to use them, how do we use them all the time in the best way? Which are the best platforms to use, and how do we generate the most efficiency and value out of those platforms? But yeah, it still comes down to process. Process is the most fundamental point of all of this. Unless we understand exactly what the process we want to move to is, then it's difficult to just overlay a platform on top of that. So we have spent a lot of time, we continue to spend a lot of time looking at the process, and then it's working out, how can technology overlay and support that? That's definitely where you need to invest a lot of time. If you just think you can move to a platform and it's going to change your world, then actually it's a lot more difficult. Law is complex. Even defining a legal process can be complex, especially when you're dealing with complex law. So if you start with your smaller, simple, standardized processes and then build from there, I think that's where you're going to get a good springboard.
Absolutely. Caroline, I wondered if you might touch on how the point that you just made, Tom, around you're now kind of gathering data as you go on the client journey and actually looking at, okay, where are we on certain matters? Caroline, are you seeing something similar with the way you are dealing with clients? Are you actually kind of mapping the client journey more than you used to, or differently? What does that look like?
I think probably the client journey, client experience is at the heart of Shoosmiths strategy. So, we've been focusing on it for quite a while. I think actually what we're seeing in the UK particularly is the fact that the focus on client collaboration and client relationship is changing. I'm very proud to be, or Shoosmiths is very proud to be part of the O-Shaped Lawyer project that has kicked off, which is much more around, the laws are given. What about all of the other facets of this relationship that really work? The commerciality and the collaboration, the relationship, etc. So yes, I think we are pushing forward on a strong with a strong emphasis for that, and I think the results we're getting back are really good. There's got to be more feedback coming out from our clients and us to say what's working and what's not working. What's really interesting, if I sit with a neutral coaching head on, when you ask private practice, sometimes they say, oh, we're not frightened, but we're concerned about feeding this back because we don't want to make things more difficult. And we've got the private practice saying, oh, we don't want to ask clients about this or tell clients that what they do is a real fly in the ointment. So we've got to open up those dialogues a bit more to some more honesty, and to the point Tom made, let's just get the processes right. Everything else falls into place when you get the processes right and people know what they should be doing, and you can openly talk about it. So I think that will be a real platform for collaboration, but there's definitely a movement towards more of that kind of interaction with clients.
Yeah. Dan, I want to come to you. What's your perspective on kind of how you could help tech or anything can improve process and improve that client journey as we go along?
Yeah, I absolutely agree with the points on that it's all three, right? It's people, processes, and technology. And the part that I'm fortunate enough to work on with Alvin and others at NetDocuments is the technology side. And so what we're really focused on is making sure that we can support the processes that are developed by our customers, and that we actually make it a kind of enjoyable experience as well. I mean, if you think about the technologies that have done that best in recent years with ride sharing, right? I mean, we've had cabs and so forth, but being able to take out your phone and call up a car it really was a simplified experience. And so we think about that in our own development process of, we know that these clients want to engage with their law firms. So how do we build a space so that they can easily go in and have access to documents securely, but then how can the law firm ensure that they have control and visibility into what's going on, and can they control how much they want to delegate to their lawyers, right? Because many times I think one of the frustration points is, great, I can request a place to share documents and so forth, but if it takes me 2 or 3 days to actually get my site that I can then share, at that point, I may have already just decided I'm emailing or I'm Dropboxing or I'm doing something else. And so we wanted to make sure that was a very streamlined path, again, to support the processes that a lot of our customers were building. So we see it as very much in line. It's obviously why it's critical for us to kind of have these conversations with the market and with customers and make sure that we are aligned with where they want to go.
Yeah.
If I could jump in. I was just going to say, just on the back of what Dan had said, I think where we still struggle and we could do better is the change management side of this. I think there are tech solutions, and if we look at any standard Bell distribution curve, you have your early adopters and then you have your laggards, and you've got this group in the middle, the majority, who need some help moving forward. And I haven't, so forgive me, I don't want to disrepute NetDocuments at all, because you might do this really beautifully, and if you do, tell me. But engaging with some tech firms, they're very good at saying, well, this is the technology and this is what you can use it for, rather than getting us involved in that change process, not only with us as a firm, but also with our clients as well, and bringing us both on that journey. Because if you don't start at the same position on that journey, it's very hard to catch up. It's very hard to move along together seamlessly if you don't have that change management pace.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Alvin, did you want to talk on some of those points or what Dan mentioned earlier?
Yeah, so we feel a great responsibility as one of the vendors in the industry that focuses on documents and single source of truth, because in any collaboration methodology that you use, whether it is email or chat or creating a deal room, closing room, not only do you have to access your documents and your emails, but you also have to capture the information on the chat, on the information in the email itself, as a canonical text that you have to be able to refer later on. So regardless, you have to capture whatever is happening, all your conversation, all of your messaging. So the concept that as a technology provider, we need to create a transparent infrastructure to assimilate all of that stuff, and then create it into a repository that is secure. The concept of adoption is very, very, very key, because without adoption, of course, none of these things will really happen. So what are the familiar things that users do that they're already doing, and how do you embrace them? And that is really pretty much the responsibility also of whoever is providing the single source of truth, because we have to encourage and also actively integrate with, like, Microsoft Teams. If that's a ubiquitous that method of collaboration, let's embrace it so that it is transparent, so that the messaging, regardless if it is initiated from the document management or from the messaging infrastructure is all captured in a single solution. So there is very little learning, very little friction in terms of adopting of these new technologies. So the same thing, there are many other things that you want to do, like managing tasks, like accessing research information, looking at the analytics like Dan mentioned. All of that, has to be built in, either provided or integrated. And then, finally, the very close working relationship with the law firms and with the client, needs to happen, to facilitate all of this change management and these and the adoption. And that's one aspect, that we want to really focus on.
Yeah, just on the adoption and change management piece, we have a comment from the audience, Mark, who says change management is key to his firm. Otherwise, tech just doesn't stick. And Tom, I wanted to pose what this area looks like for you, because you mentioned at the beginning, your teams weren't really using very many technologies from the start, but now all of a sudden you're able to have those conversations. So what does change management and adoption of these different collaboration technologies, but also whatever tech that you guys use internally, what does that look like now for you?
Yeah, so I mean, we use multiple platforms, and I think there is a little bit of a challenge that we have in terms of we have to think about who our stakeholders are as well, and that legal doesn't necessarily own the decision around the platform. So we do have this concept of multiple platforms, but we do, support where we can run an entire process in a single platform with people that have really helped us to design the process into that. So using service design resources, using the lawyers to actually feed into it and help design it so it's going to work, and then getting feedback from our other stakeholders is what we've seen is kind of leading to a successful adoption, but not just adoption, actually delivering benefits. So if everyone uses it, great, but if there's no benefit, then people will eventually over time move away from it. I think if you can demonstrate that at the same time you're making a task easier, you're making it quicker, so you can add like a self-service capability, or you can have some data that's really going to say, well, hang on a second, we didn't realize that was an issue, or that process was taking so long, or we had so many of those. Until you've got that analytical insight, you can only get so far by having the technology. I think that what we are therefore doing is the more that we see these benefits, the more that you then look across all the other processes you've got and can say, well, hang on a second, we can do this really good at the basic level. How do we now apply this methodology or technology or understanding of these kind of opportunities to more complex advisory? How do you take some of the things that you think you can't move away from email and actually overlay some of the capabilities that we've got with something that's really standardized? How do you get the benefits at all layers of the legal process? And that's where there's still a huge opportunity. I think that we want to sit down probably at the end of a transaction, you look back and say, well, what do we learn from that? How could we have collaborated differently? How could we have used technology to support that process? And if you're in a negotiation, you're sort of the 11th hour, and historically you would have been in a meeting room and you would have had the screen share and everyone is literally staring at a screen. That delivers an efficiency that you would previously have taken like 2 or 3 weeks to have achieved the result by exchange of email. If you can generate that same type of engagement with real-time document editing and instantly sharing, a single source of meeting minutes, all those things like that, that's a real opportunity. And I don't think we're doing that at every use case at the moment. We're doing it sporadically, doing it better than, depending on the matter at different stages of the journey on that. And we want to try and bring everything up to that level of what good looks like. And that's where there's a huge amount of opportunity. But for that, I think we need law firms to work with us and say, how can we collaborate with you? Some of the models we use actually now, if I look at the terms we have with some of our providers, the collaboration is now a part of it. So we will collaborate with you to deliver you the best technology solutions for your needs. So that's having that kind of commitment is where you want to be going to, I think.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. If we just kind of jump back a little bit, I know in our kind of prep for these sessions, you mentioned how you work differently with different types of providers in the legal space as well. So you mentioned that you kind of work with traditional law firms, but also alternative legal service providers, which is a big growth area for the legal market. And I'm wondering, probably a lot of people in the audience are wondering, what's the appeal for working with each, and does one do collaboration or innovation better than the other? What are your thoughts on that?
It's difficult to put them side by side, because I think what you end up with is, once you understand, I think that it's been mentioned a number of times, but the people, so you work out what are the right lawyers to support that particular type of task, then what you can start to do is to allocate it more effectively. And you're always going to have, specialist law firms where you need that experience and that expertise. And then at the same time, you've got an opportunity to look to make your processes more automated, more standardized, and that naturally kind of lends itself to some of the higher volume type work. And within that kind of framework, you've then got the opportunity to get people to come and really help you deliver those services in a really efficient manner, using really good process mapping and really good technology. And so what we've been able to do is, by embracing the model of kind of a new law firm tech partnership, we've been able to get to where we wanted to get to a lot quicker, because it takes time to do these things. To adopt the technology is complicated, but if you've got a law firm that's coming to you and saying, we're going to help you improve your process by bringing the best technology and the best people, and at the end of it, you're going to have a more efficient process with data that demonstrates that it's more efficient on a it used to take X number of hours to do this. Now it takes half the time and it's half the cost. And that's what you want to be the outcome to be.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Caroline, it'd be interesting to hear your thoughts on that, kind of different ways that different legal service providers work. And does that pose a threat to your business, and drive you to become more efficient or more innovative with clients than you had in the past?
I'll take the question in two different parts, if I may. The onus should always be on any business to be more efficient and to deliver a solution more effectively. The fact that ABSs have come into the mix, they do provide something different. But I think where we would sit would be the fact that any new entrant into a market is healthy competition, and it's not something to be feared. If anything, it's just make sure if you're confident in what you deliver as a good product, then you just keep doing that. I think in terms of tech, though, for me, I concur with what Tom was saying. Just because you have tech doesn't mean you should use it. I don't think, you've got to have the right solution for the problem that you're trying to overcome. I think it was Einstein saying, if you give me an hour to solve a problem, I'd spend 55 minutes thinking of the question to ask, and then the last 5 minutes designing the solution. And I think we need to ask more questions, really understand what the problem is, how can we improve the process, and then the technology overlays that. And those questions will be different depending on what type of law you have. So I agree with Tom. I think there's an opportunity to use more cost-effective structures, and then to use people who have spent their life curating their knowledge and have all of that experiential knowledge. And because for me, that's where the value lies in a private practice. It's the years of collective clever that you've taken from various deals, etc., that you then apply to the solution at hand. And so I think there's a place for everybody, honestly.
Mm-hmm, absolutely. In our last couple of minutes, I'll pose one final question to each of you. Is what's next in the space? What's next for the digital world, for digital collaboration? Lots of firms are coming on to this conversation within their firms now, is just what is the new normal going to look for us, and how do we use technology? And I'll start with Alvin. What's next?
Well, what we have seen is that COVID has improved, and at least for our users, 20% productivity. And the next step is absolutely much more smoother collaboration that really delivers results, that is secure from infrastructure perspective, that is available globally so that you can access it anywhere in the world, and that it can encompass all of the most important aspects of your tools. The things that you do on a daily basis should be quickly embraced, organized into a single whole, transparent for the user, so that it is not a new thing when he or she switches from documents to tasks to analytics, to looking at who's doing what and where. So that is the whole concept of an integrated whole to increase the client and lawyer productivity. the new norm right now, in a sense, we're socially distanced with our clients. It is use the cloud, use the digital infrastructure to collaborate. And the human factor of ease of use, of peace of mind, and looking forward, to just continuing doing what they're doing in a much more efficient way. I think is the key for what's next.
Great. Yeah, Dan, what's next?
I know we're short on time. We've already hit on a couple of them with analytics and others. I would just say, it's also the other folks who are part of this collaboration are the systems that we use. And so it's about how the systems can actually speak to and become part of the conversation, how they can deliver information in a timely fashion, at the right time, right place, right forum, to be part of that intelligent conversation. So I think that's an area that we're doing a lot with in the automation space, and expect to see a lot more in the years to come.
Great, thanks. Tom, what's next for you?
I think a lot more automation. I think automation is the next level. When you've got your processes well mapped, you've got your technology platforms adopted, the next is really driving in efficiency, which is trying to automate as much as possible. And at the same time, recognizing that there's certain things that can't be automated and certain things that can't be moved to a platform, and having a real kind of smart mapping of what the right model is for each of your different processes.
Yeah, I'm sensing a theme here. Caroline, what's next for you?
I'm gonna buck the trend then. So there is a bit of a theme. I think, yeah, absolutely. We've got to automation where we can. For me, it's that human overlay every single time. I don't think we can get away from that. And I think the technology is at risk of becoming so advanced so quickly that we don't bring the humans along with us. I know there are a lot of questions out there, particularly in the automated world, where people are saying, are we going to lose jobs? And I think we need to reassure people that actually the beauty of a human is that emotional interaction that you have with them, that emotional intelligence that they can apply to a situation. And I know that the technology is getting there, and it can make some of those judgments for individuals, but I still think that we're not there yet. So until that's built in, until we can have some more of that, and I'm talking about really easy things like pulse surveys and finding, bringing the technology along with how humans are feeling as part of this. The teams that deliver these services, both internally as in Tom's world and in my term, at the end of the day, that team ethos is made up of people. So how do we bring them along too?
Mm-hmm. Great. Well, thank you so much for joining the conversation. Lots really to dig in there, and lots more questions for the future, I'm sure. So thank you again to NetDocuments for putting this on with us today. And thank you all for joining. I hope we'll see you next time.
Thank you.